Hi. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started tonight. I know we're getting a bit of a late start, but life is what it is. So, anyway, if you're here live, thank you for joining me tonight. And if you are watching this on YouTube or on Facebook or Instagram, one of the replays, then welcome. Tonight, we're talking about the 10 questions, which is something that we refer to in Chinese medicine as the name that we use to call the interview process that we use when we are talking to a patient, trying to figure out, what the root cause of their issues is. So we call them the 10 questions, and I'm going to talk to you tonight a little bit about how you can use these 10 questions to jumpstart your health. Okay, so there's two major pieces to an intake interview in Chinese medicine. The first part is usually like a how are you, how's life, and what's going on, right? The bit where you fill us in on any of the recent details, or in the case of a new patient, a health history, and also to generate for us just a full picture of your current concern. And the next bit is the one that we're talking about tonight, which is one of the hallmarks of TCM, really, as it happens in all patient interviews. And it really highlights the holistic nature of how we diagnose what we refer to as patterns of disharmony. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is make an informed differential diagnosis, or to differentiate which particular pattern is the root cause of your concern. So some of the things that we're going to talk about are the difference between signs and symptoms. So this quote by John Brown is kind of amazing, right? Symptoms are the body's mother tongue. Signs are in a foreign language. And to us as practitioners, right, we differentiate that. We say, okay, that which is reported by the patient is a sign, and that which is detected by the wait, scratch that, go back. Sorry. In medicine, we differentiate between symptoms, that which is reported by the patient, and signs, that which is detected by the practitioner. So, in the 10 questions, as we call them, those are designed to elicit the most specific and informative symptoms from our patients. So, when we talk about, we want to talk to you about what you're feeling. And so, these questions are designed to get you to express what you're feeling in the most specific and informative way for us, so that we can then take that information and work it through our differential diagnosis problem. So many people are surprised by the variety of questions, and they're also not used to thinking about many of the things that we ask about, much less they're not used to talking about them. But they were designed thousands of years ago, and they're really just a way for us to cover all the bases of holistic health, and the picture that we're trying to create, and they still work, which is just amazing. Um, so observation is part of our diagnostic program, right? When you walk through the door, we're observing how you walk, how you look, how you speak, all of these things we take note of. But one of the things that I want you to understand, because this lecture is really all about you, right, is that by you turning your observation inward, you can make change, right? So, one of the favorite lectures we have in Chinese medicine, we start talking about physics and quantum mechanics, factors heavily in a lot of the science that we talk about within Chinese medicine. So, in quantum mechanics, we know that just the act of observing something affects the probabilities of movement within that particular thing. And when we talk about the universe and all the different waveforms, and it's Schrodinger who developed this theory. And of course, Schrodinger's cat is the physics experiment, the thought experiment that everybody quotes, much to the chagrin of many physicists out there. But anyway, this idea that by observing something, you somehow affect it or you change it. And I think we see this play out in our lives very frequently, where we say, oh, okay, have you ever kept a food diary, for instance, right? It's amazing to me how when you ask somebody to actually keep track of and write down what they put into their bodies on a daily basis, the things that they put into their bodies are actually healthier for them overall. And so you'll find that just the act of keeping a food diary improves your dietary intake, right? People who are trying to lose weight often find this like, oh, I just kept a food diary and I did so much better. And you go, yeah, it's because you're paying attention and you're having to be honest with yourself about keeping track of those things. So the idea of just looking at it objectively, non-judgmentally, actually informs you and changes your behavior. The other thing that I like to think about when we talk about this kind of observational factor of quantum mechanics is when we talk about things like mindfulness meditation, right? It's the perfect example. You are observing an unfocused mind as a means to train it to focus. So, it works both ways. Right? Either observing what you are doing and then shifting it, or actually using observation as an intention to change your behavior. So those are just a couple of examples, and I think that's the really powerful part of the 10 questions, is that what we'll do is we'll kind of go through them with you a little bit, and we're going to show you ways on how you can be more mindful about your body and what it's telling you, so that sooner rather than later, you can begin to take note and change things that might be causing you discomfort or potentially illness. So the first thing that you need to know about the 10 questions is that there's actually more like 16 of them. And this is just because it's been thousands of years of Chinese medicine. And you know, at first it was 10 and then it was 12 and now it's like 16. It's like you gather them all together, you have about 16. But we're not going to go through all of them tonight because we just don't have time to go through all of them tonight. But I think it's important that we take a look at what they are and that we understand a few of the key points about them as we move through. So the 10 questions as they stand, or rather the 16 questions, are we ask you about your pain, your food, if you have particular taste. We want to talk about your stools and your urine. I know we don't like to talk about poop. We love to talk about poop in Chinese medicine, and we'll get to that later about why it's so diagnostic, but we have no problem talking about your poop and your pee. We also talk about your thirst and what you're drinking, what your energy levels are, if there's anything happening in your head or your face or your body. So we kind of go through these places, your chest, your abdomen, your limbs, right? We want to talk about your ears and your eyes, all the different places on your body. And then we're going to talk about your sleep, your sweating, your temperature, any emotional symptoms you have, any symptoms that pertain to you specifically as a woman, either menstruation or pregnancy or menopause related, women's health issues specifically. If you're a child, we handle that a little bit differently because, of course, it's not you that's talking. It's, like you're talking for your child. So it's important that we kind of do that just a little differently. And then also we talk about sexual symptoms. And I know that this is a taboo subject in a lot of cultures, but it's important and it's an important marker about your health and well-being. And so we'll talk about that too. So um, as you can see, there's a few categories of questions. Here, we'll go back. As you can see, there's a few categories of questions that we have, right? And so I'm going to take those and break them down into their basic categories for you and talk a little bit about how that works, right? So the first one that we're going to talk about is the areas of the body, right? And one of the reasons why I personally like to do that relaxing meditation practice of, scanning your body from head to toe and identifying tension in the different parts of the body is that it gives me the opportunity to sort of take stock and really pay attention to the different parts of my body, right? I identify pain or tension and the location of symptoms and discomforts, right? And in fact, it's interesting, when I was in school, one of the memorization techniques that was taught to us was to meditate through the paths of the meridians, point by point along your body. It was ridiculously informative and actually really helpful to helping us, memorize those points and those pathways. But in these questions, when you're talking to your acupuncturist, and indeed when you're scanning through your own body, right, I want you to think about descriptive words that you can think of to describe these things. And that's what's going to help us. And that's what's going to give you a bit more of a picture of where you are, right? Things to just pay attention to, because once you identify things and name them, then when they shift, then that's going to bring a whole new piece to your puzzle, right? So we want to talk about things like the location and the nature of the sensation. Is it heavy? Is it sharp? Distending? Burning? What's the timing? Does it radiate? Or, there's a bunch of ways that you could describe those things. And so get comfortable using adjectives about the things that your body is telling you as you go through and scan your body. The next category, broad category, we're going to call it, is constitutional factors. So, category number two, the questions like temperature, sweat, energy, and sexual symptoms, right? Those can indicate your constitutional resilience, right? They can tell you whether you're fighting an illness or maybe heading down the path of hormonal imbalance. These tell us a bit about where your constitutional strengths and weaknesses lie, right? It affects our ability to withstand an externally derived illness, and it also sheds light on the early stages of hormonal shifts. So these are things to keep in mind, and mostly though it's important when you're looking at things that are referring to your constitution. Everybody's a unique human being, and so it's most important that you can compare these symptoms to you and your past self and identify if and how these things have changed over time, right? So, you know, are you fighting an illness? Has there been a change from what is normal for you? And those are the important bits about these kinds of questions. So think about like, am I managing the shift between summer and autumn? Am I having to put a sweater on even when my house is warm? Or am I sweating all the time when I'm just sitting there doing nothing? Do I no longer have the energy that I'm used to having to go through, the normal tasks of my daily life? So those are kinds of things to think about, right? So the next category that we're going to talk about, number three, is digestion and thirst. So we talk about the food, we talk about the water, and I know that it feels like to me, at least in my practice, that illness has come into the body to stay for a little while, whether it's just a food allergy that you've kind of grown susceptible to that you need to get rid of, or if there's something that's gone a little bit deeper, something that it's not just your common cold, but it's something that's lasting longer than a few weeks, right? So anything that comes to stay for a little while, it usually manifests in the gut and the water metabolism. And so these questions are really designed to illuminate those issues, right? How well you manage your food and water intake and metabolism, like it says volumes about the functional health of your body. In today's modern world, we know that there are things that we could or should do to improve this aspect of our lives. As the saying goes, right? Garbage in, garbage out. But I am not into should. And in my clinic, I assume that you are doing the best that you can. So if there are issues, my first two questions are A, what can acupuncture or herbal medicine do to support you where you are? And B, is there one thing, just one thing that maybe you can change or incorporate into your daily routine that will improve this picture? In TCM, we do have an ideal of what we're looking for, and deviations from this ideal picture, while they're common, are not what normal function looks like. And I think it's important. This is one of the most frequent places where I talk to people about the difference between what is normal and the difference between what is common. So, sure, there are symptoms that are common amongst the population, but that doesn't mean that that's normal function. So, things like belching and wind should not be a part of your daily life. Pooping, it needs to happen at least one time a day, and it should be an easy activity. Beyond that, food cravings are nutritional deficiencies and stress recovery, and this is your body talking to you and asking for what it needs. So, does this mean that I advocate chocolate and crisps? I have been known to prescribe such things on occasion, but it depends on the person, of course, right? And your urinary system is an early warning sign for other kind of chronic conditions. So um, it's an oddity sort of in TCM because Western medicine looks at your urinary system as one of the last to register pathology, right? If there's trouble going on with your kidneys, that's a serious thing in Western medicine. But we don't look at that. We don't look at it that same way in Chinese medicine. So, uh, you know, we we pay more attention to it. when it's earlier, and we use it as a marker of metabolic health. So we look at your urinary habits and how well you're managing your water intake and output, as a means of saying, oh, okay, your water metabolism is functioning properly. And in that way, we can catch illnesses really before they start. So the bottom line here is to pay attention to your eliminations and how your body responds to its needs and requests for food and water. So just bringing your attention to those two things could change and improve your health. Okay. Um, I love this quote. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with sleep. So, as you might guess, the next slide is about, or the next topic we're going to talk about is sleep. This is the only slide you get. You get to look at Shakespeare's words and the very tired woman on the bed. Anyway, I want to talk about sleep and emotions, because those are sort of the next category. And in Chinese medicine, these are very heavily linked. But, um, you know, three questions. Are you falling asleep? Are you staying asleep? And are you waking refreshed? And if you said no to any of those three questions, there are points for that. So you should work on improving the quality and the nature of your sleep. And acupuncture is actually really, really good to help do that. It's one of the very unintended side effects, actually. I oftentimes have patients come in and they're like, oh, my back hurts. And so I fix their back and we do some acupuncture. And then like they come back the next week for a follow-up and they're like, oh, God, I slept really well after that treatment. And I'm like, yeah, acupuncture does that. So the acupuncture and herbs are really wonderful for improving it. And seriously, like those questions that I ask, those are actually diagnostic for me. So they will help me diagnose other syndromes that go on. And I also like to know if you're dreaming, and particularly if they're vivid, because as I said, sleep and the emotions are very intricately linked. And so it's important when you're having your dreams, like that's part of your shen, or that soul piece of you that's working through the emotions of the day. And so if you have vivid dreams, that means that we need to rebalance something that's going on. So and the other thing that's important to remember, and Western and Chinese medicine both agree on this, and that is that sleep is fundamental to your overall well-being. So after making sure that my patients are pooping regularly, my next task is making sure that they're getting adequate restful sleep. And honestly, just correcting both of those issues is life changing for people. So you just can't underestimate how important these things really are to your overall quality of life. It shifts so many things. And I know you've heard me say this before, but emotions are part of your health. I can feel them in your pulse when I'm doing your intake, and taking a chance to check in with yourself on a regular basis is really important. So they're both a cause and a symptom in Chinese medicine. So understanding the rhythms of your feelings can be really helpful in understanding your body as a holistic organism. So think about what you're feeling and how you're responding to the world around you in that way. So the next slide and the next subject we're going to talk about is development. So we're getting into this last category, and I split it into two, but the last category really are patient specific in the sense that we're talking about, children and women's health and men and sexual health, right? But this is all sort of like depending on the stage you are in your life, these things are pertinent, right? So it's no less fundamental to your health. It's just not always talked about, right? So in this case, when we're talking about development, you know, uh, children's bodies are growing so fast, and most signs of illness will change rapidly. And so to know what you're working with and to understanding your child's rhythm and what is normal or not normal for them is crucial as a parent. Working with holistic medicine too. So you add to that that most children don't have the language skills to communicate their issues, and they are still so tuned into the sort of holistic nature of their bodies. Anything that affects them in one system is affecting another. And so it can oftentimes feel like you're playing a bit of whack-a-mole with a child. One symptom pops up and you nab that, and then another one comes out, and you really, it's hard. You have to look at it from the whole picture, but it's where that intimacy and the relationship with your child come in. Um, And so we have to look at their symptoms from a little bit of a different perspective. So we look at things like picky eating, vomiting, reflux, colic, teething, any immunization reactions they have, and their overall sleep patterns. And, for most children, their symptoms swing between the digestive and the respiratory. Those are where they're sort of most common, and there are developmental reasons for that. We do a talk on pediatrics, which is one of my favorite ways to practice. We can talk a little bit more about some of those common things, but those are that's axis through which they sort of progress. And then we also we want to know things about like their birth experience, right? Was it difficult or traumatic, and their early eating habits. And I think, as parents, we're always really hyper aware of our children, and 99% of the time our children are super resilient and they're doing just fine. So as a parent, it's important for you to remember that, right? But the takeaway is, if your child has a chronic constellation of digestive system issues or respiratory system issues. We're talking ear infections, stomach aches, I say rashes, although it's funny because I consider rashes having to do with the lung system. So like the skin and the respiratory system are interconnected for me as an acupuncturist, but I realize from a Western context that's not. But these are sort of things. So if you see these, right, getting those things sorted sooner rather than later will benefit both of you, but it's likely not as serious or severe as you may be fearing. So, also, many of the most common pediatric ailments I see in my clinic have an emotional component. So, again, like because most children don't have the communication skills, they also have a profoundly powerful and personal imagination life. And so, we don't always know, or we're not always aware of the emotional component that's happening within our children's lives. And for them, those emotional things manifest physically instantly. I mean, there's no separation and there's no difference for them between those two systems. So those are my key things for children and for their development. And last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about women's health, right? As a woman, your body cycles through a series of hormonal ups and downs every single month. And it brings along with it a veritable fount of information about the complicated picture that is your overall health. So, here again, we have an ideal picture of what a woman's menstruation is supposed to look like. And let me tell you, it's not what you've been led to believe, right? So, we don't talk about periods. We call them periods, right? There are words for this, and we don't use it. We use all the other words, and I call them lots of things, and you can call them whatever you want when you're in my office because I don't judge. But as a society, we have failed women by not allowing ourselves, even amongst ourselves, really, to talk freely about these things. And so, any symptoms that follow your cycle and the length and quality even of the menstrual period itself are diagnostic in Chinese medicine. So I'm a big fan of taking one day a month to honor the work that your body is doing. If your moon cycle is disrupting your life on the regular, you should come see an acupuncturist. This is our jam. We are very good at regulating your hormones, your sex hormones, your menstruation. It's why people use acupuncture for fertility all the time. And on that note, as a woman, getting your cycle healthy and regular is foundational to preserving and maintaining your current and future fertility. So do your future self a favor and bring your attention here to your cycle just to see what you can learn about you, right? And also for those of us who are beginning the journey out of our fertile years, menopause does not have to cause you suffering. There are herbs for that. So please, we have somehow been sold a load of goods as women in today's world that like, we have to suffer, right? Our periods are suffering, our childbirth is suffering, our menopause is suffering. And I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be this way. So also pregnancy and childbirth are 100% not illnesses and shouldn't be treated as such. So while there are many, many things that I can do as an acupuncturist to assist your body during this time, I want you to remember that your body knows best. And this goes for all of us that are not pregnant too. So I know that I mentioned sex earlier as part of the constitutional picture, and it is for both men and women. Like it has constitutional elements, but mostly because it sort of runs into that deeper hormonal levels. But this is also developmental as well. And I've included it here because, in much the same way that menstruation can be highly diagnostic in women's health, sexual function can do that for both men and women. So we need to get over our inability to acknowledge that sex is part of the human experience. Sex is not actually a four-letter word, and neither is orgasm or erection or libido. And we can talk about those things. And as a physician, I talk about those things all the time because they are an important part of your health. I'm not shy or squeamish, and I would encourage you to not be the same, to not be sorry. Yeah, I would encourage you to be the same, right? We can talk about it. Everybody does it. So, with that said, these are some of the ways that you can bring your attention back to your body and use the questions that we as acupuncturists ask you on a regular basis when you're in our clinic to get a better picture of your own health, right? So if you only do three things based on this lecture, first, pay attention to your digestion. Just notice it. It's a really important thing, right? Second, make sure you pay attention to how you're sleeping. I mean, I think that's probably the easiest one for most people, right? Are you waking refreshed? Are you having trouble sleeping? Just notice it, right? And then thirdly, what has changed in your life, in your body? And instead of sort of getting over it and ignoring it and just moving on with your life, you can see it, acknowledge it, and still get on with your life. But by seeing it and acknowledging it, you can watch how it changes and shifts over time. And if you get to a place where you feel like you need help with it, you'll have better language to describe it and to get the real help that you need. So thank you again for joining me tonight. It's such an honor to be able to talk to you all about this subject that I love so much. I do these every other week. This tonight was the first lecture that we had on our diagnosis series. So coming up, we're going to talk more about tongues and pulses, which are other pieces of Chinese medicine diagnosis. And so I hope you'll tune in and join us for those. Um, and then, once we get into it, if there's any subject that you want me to cover that I haven't covered yet, please let me know. Let me know in the comments and the questions in the chat. Just drop me a line, and I'm happy to cover any subject that is a burning question for you. So that's that. And then if you think you might be interested in seeing what Chinese medicine has to offer you for your health, I do free 20-minute consultations. So I'll give it to you straight. I really just want people to have a better handle on their bodies and their health. And if there's something I can do to help you, that's great. If you need a different kind of help, I'm not ashamed to say, hey, I think you'd be better off going to see so-and-so or something else. So, but give me a call. We'll chat. 20 minutes is not very long, and I'm happy to answer questions and see if I can't just get you pointed in the right direction. And last but not least, if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, you should head on over to the website and do so. I only send it out once a week, and it's usually something really simple. I don't need to take up your time. I just want to be a source of uplift and empowerment to your weekly life. So if you want to know what I'm thinking about or what we're talking about or something that, burning inspiration about health and medicine that might improve your life, go ahead, sign up for the email address. I won't ever share it, and because we all have inboxes that are way too busy. And I look forward to talking with you further in the future. So have a great night. Bye.